Chapter 1: The Turning Point. The press conference is supposed to be a victory lap. Instead, the lead scientist reads from a prepared statement with the careful voice of someone delivering bad news to a room full of investors. The next model isn't coming. Not delayed. Cancelled. In the weeks before the announcement, rumors had already thickened. Benchmark leaks that looked wrong. Hiring freezes at labs that never froze. A quiet shift in language, from breakthrough to optimization. Then the memo appears, screenshot and forwarded until it becomes a headline. Scaling has stalled. Not because anyone stopped trying, but because the obvious levers are no longer levers. The newest training run used more compute than any run in history, drew power like a small city, and produced a model that was mostly the same. Slightly better at some tasks, slightly worse at others. More expensive to run, harder to control, and still prone to the same humiliating failures. It is not the kind of failure you can spin into early access. It is a ceiling. Executives explain it as a temporary plateau. They promise new data, new chips, new architectures. But inside the labs, the atmosphere turns colder. The teams chasing the next leap start discovering that the leap depends on things that cannot be summoned with money alone. Training data is running out of quality. The internet is increasingly polluted with synthetic text. Court rulings and licensing fights choke off whole libraries. Energy regulators push back against clusters that want to double, then double again. And the specialized hardware supply chain is no longer a smooth river. It is a set of gates controlled by geopolitics. A year later, the second shoe drops. A competing lab publishes its own admission, disguised as a technical paper. Returns are diminishing faster than costs are rising. Frontier becomes an awkward word, because frontiers are supposed to move. Then the third lab, the one that always seemed unstoppable, quietly changes its roadmap. No more huge models. No more public promises. Just product improvements, like a phone update. That is the divergence. The world doesn't lose AI. It loses the expectation that AI will keep getting better on schedule. For a decade, that expectation had been the hidden engine of plans. Governments wrote strategies assuming compounding capability. Companies built workflows that assumed next year's tools would solve this year's problems. Investors priced a future where cognition was cheap and expanding. Now the engine sputters. And the first thing to break is not technology, it is confidence. Chapter 2: The Early Effects. The collapse begins in spreadsheets. Valuations that were justified by the next model suddenly look like faith-based accounting. Public companies tied to AI infrastructure fall hard, then keep falling, because no one knows where the bottom is. Startups that lived off the promise of imminent capability upgrades go dark overnight. Their customers don't leave in anger. They leave in exhaustion. Inside big firms, the tone changes. AI stops being a revolution and becomes a cost center. Boards demand cuts. Executives demand ROI, the phrase that kills dreams politely. Entire departments that were built around experimenting with future tools are told to ship something useful with what they already have. That is when the second, quieter effect emerges. The AI that exists is already embedded. Call centers use it. Hospitals use it. Courts use it. Banks use it. Newsrooms use it, even when they pretend they don't. The stall doesn't remove these systems. It freezes them in place, with their strengths and their flaws locked in like defects in poured concrete. Governments react like governments do when a promised advantage might disappear. They reach for control. Compute becomes strategic infrastructure. New licensing regimes appear, first as safety oversight, then as a way to decide who gets to train at scale. Export controls tighten. Chip smuggling becomes a real industry, the kind that attracts criminal networks and intelligence services at the same time. The global race doesn't end. It gets uglier. The story every leader tells their public is simple. We will catch up. We will leapfrog. We will not fall behind. But behind the speeches is a practical fear. If AI isn't accelerating, then the advantage goes to whoever already has the best models, the most data, and the most integration. That advantage is uneven. It hardens quickly. Meanwhile, a different kind of chaos spreads. Disinformation doesn't need better models. It needs scale. Static systems, already powerful enough, are turned into factories. Synthetic news sites multiply. Automated influence campaigns get cheaper. Deepfakes stop being novel and start being routine, and the public stops asking whether something is real. They ask whether it matters. That change, more than any benchmark, is the early political wound. Because a democracy can survive disagreement, it struggles to survive permanent epistemic fog. The stall was supposed to calm the world. Instead, it removes a kind of hope. The hope that tomorrow's tool will help us police today's chaos. The chaos stays, the tool stops improving. And the institutions that bet on improvement now have to run, forever, on a fixed version of reality. Chapter 3. The cracks appear. The first major scandal comes from a place that used to feel boring: insurance. A national insurer had automated claims decisions with an AI system that was good enough and getting better every quarter. Now it is not getting better. Now it is just getting more deeply embedded. When an audit finally forces the company to show its error rates, the numbers are ugly. Not catastrophic. Consistently wrong in ways that always land on the same people. The company blames edge cases. The public hears something else. We automated a human judgment and then stopped caring whether it learned. Protests start small. A few officers, a few marches. Then the story finds its way into politics, where it becomes a weapon that fits every hand. Populists claim the stall proves the elites were lying. Technocrats claim the stall proves regulation and lawsuits killed innovation. Security hawks claim the stall proves the nation must seize compute like it once seized oil fields. No one agrees on the cause. Everyone agrees on the threat. And in that disagreement, the cracks widen. Cybercrime grows teeth. Defenders had relied on the same pattern. The attackers improve. Then the defenders buy the next defensive system. Now the upgrade loop breaks. Attackers don't need new ideas. They need time. They probe the same static defenses until they find the seams. Ransomware shifts from opportunistic to strategic. Hospitals get hit in coordinated waves. Ports get hit before holidays. Municipalities get hit in clusters, the way a storm hits a coastline. Governments respond with task forces and press briefings. The public responds with a deeper kind of resignation. If the tools aren't improving, then this level of vulnerability is permanent. That is when the most dangerous adaptation begins. Organizations start hiding failures instead of fixing them. If they can't upgrade their way out, they can only manage perceptions. Leaked incident reports get classified as national security. Banks quietly cap withdrawals in affected regions for system integrity. Schools stop reporting certain kinds of harassment because the moderation systems can't keep up and nobody wants to admit it. The stall turns embarrassment into policy. Then a geopolitical shock forces the issue. A mid-sized country, struggling under sanctions and eager for leverage, reveals it has built an independent frontier program. It publishes dramatic videos. It claims it has broken the plateau. Its rivals dismiss it. Then an insider leaks the truth. It didn't break the plateau. It stole older model weights, fine-tuned them with stolen data, and wrapped the whole thing in propaganda. The reveal should be a relief. Instead, it becomes a warning. If no one can improve, then everyone will cheat. Espionage becomes the only path to progress. Sabotage becomes the only way to slow competitors. The new arms race is not about building the next mind. It is about poisoning the minds we already have. Synthetic data floods training pipelines on purpose. Model supply chains get attacked like physical supply chains. The trust boundary shifts. People used to ask whether the model was smart. Now they ask whether the model is compromised. By the time leaders recognize what has changed, the stall has already rewritten the world's incentives. When growth stops, fear finds new routes. Chapter 4. The New Normal. The adaptation is not heroic, it is administrative. Companies stop promising artificial general intelligence and start selling reliability upgrades, which mostly means better interfaces, better monitoring, and human review. The phrase human in the loop returns, not as ethics, but as insurance. A new profession emerges. Not AI engineers chasing brilliance, but auditors chasing damage. They don't build new mines. They build guardrails around old ones. Governments change their strategies in ways they never admit out loud. They stop betting on miraculous leaps and start betting on control of deployment. If the models are stable, then the advantage belongs to whoever can integrate them into bureaucracy, surveillance, logistics, and finance faster than rivals can. That sounds like competence. In practice, it looks like quiet consolidation. The same few vendors become unavoidable. The same few cloud providers become national arteries. The store makes monopoly feel like safety because switching becomes terrifying when no alternative is meaningfully better. In democracies, the backlash becomes a permanent feature, not a single movement, but a mood. Citizens demand AI bans in schools, courts, and healthcare. They also demand services delivered faster and cheaper. Politicians promise both, then implement neither cleanly. So the systems persist, awkwardly, banned in public, used in practice, denied in press releases. In authoritarian states, the stall produces a different kind of stability. If the models are good enough to classify, predict, and nudge, then rulers don't need improvements. They need scale and silence. Old errors become structural. Bias becomes policy. And because there is no narrative of constant technical progress, there is less pressure to justify why the systems keep failing the same people in the same ways. The future that was supposed to be dynamic becomes static. Internationally, power shifts in slow motion. Countries that invested heavily in AI talent don't collapse. They simply discover that talent alone can't conjure new returns. Energy, manufacturing capacity, and supply chain resilience regain status as decisive resources. A nation that can't train a better model can still win by building cheaper chips, securing cheap power, and exporting the infrastructure everyone else depends on. The new competition is industrial again, not because the digital world disappears, but because it stops offering easy compounding. The world begins to feel, in subtle ways, like it has been denied a shortcut. Humans have to do the hard parts. Not because humans are superior, because the machine stopped getting better at hiding its limits. Chapter 5. The World That Follows. A generation later, the plateau is no longer news. It is background climate. The AI systems people use are powerful, familiar, and strangely predictable. They draft memos and write code and generate images, and everyone knows the kinds of mistakes they make, the way everyone knows the kinds of mistakes a GPS makes. Entire training programs exist to teach young workers how to work with the model, which mostly means how to anticipate where it will fail. Companies keep private versions of older systems like heirlooms. They don't upgrade, they preserve. Governments treat model weights like strategic reserves, not because the models are sacred, but because they are scarce. When the tools stop improving, the world stops expecting salvation by software. Science slows in places where AI had promised acceleration. Drug discovery becomes steadier, less dramatic. Climate modeling becomes more incremental, less cinematic. The dream of a sudden leap in understanding fades, replaced by patient work and uncomfortable trade-offs. At the same time, the psychological temperature changes. People stop waiting for the next big thing to rewrite their lives. They start making long-term decisions as if the tools will be roughly the same for years. Education shifts back toward fundamentals, not out of nostalgia, but out of necessity. Public institutions invest in redundancy. Paper backup procedures return. Human training budgets, once cut in anticipation of automation, are rebuilt with a kind of embarrassed urgency. The security environment remains tense. The stall did not end cyber conflict. It made it chronic. The same playbooks repeat. The same defenses repeat. The same breaches happen in new places because the ecosystem is too large to harden completely, and no one expects a future model to solve it. So the world learns to live with a permanent hum of digital risk, like a permanent hum of inflation. In that world, stability is possible. It is just not the stability people imagined. It is a stability built on bounded tools, bounded expectations, and a quiet acceptance that intelligence is not a resource that can be scaled indefinitely like storage. The future still arrives. It just arrives without acceleration. Epilogue. This timeline branches from a belief more than a breakthrough, that progress in intelligence would compound the way progress in computing once did. When that belief breaks, it doesn't destroy the tools we already built. It changes the contracts we wrote around them, the plans we made, and the risks we were willing to ignore. A plateau is not dramatic like a collapse, which is why it is so dangerous. It tempts institutions to keep running as if the next upgrade is coming, even when it isn't. And the most unsettling part is how little the world has to do wrong for it to happen. It only has to keep betting on tomorrow while forgetting that tomorrow is not guaranteed to improve.